Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And things are going pretty well so far here in the 2036 season. 54 games into the year, so exactly 1/3 of the way into the season. We've got a 2.5 game lead on the Texas Rangers in the AL West. The Rangers have won 3 straight division titles and 2 World Series over the past 3 years, so being ahead of them in the standings is certainly a good positive step in the right direction. Playing our best baseball of the year right now with 8 consecutive wins that have taken us from behind the Rangers to ahead of them in the standings. Juan Ramos, who we traded for last season while he was out all year with a serious injury, leading the league in ribbies. And our young second baseman, Alejandro Landin, is third in the league in ribbies. Unfortunately, as you can see, he's injured, diagnosis pending, some type of foot injury, so hopefully it won't be too serious. Jake Ortega, who was the 2034 American League MVP, is leading the American League in batter war here 2 months into the season. And our ace, Jackson Ferris, is tied for the league lead with 8 wins and second in the league with 90 strikeouts, having an excellent season at the age of 32 years old. So the hope is we can keep the momentum going through the midpoint of the season. We did do a couple of moves very recently that I want to talk about. We promoted a couple of our key prospects up to AAA, and like Doug Weiss, who we promoted to the majors finally about a week and a half ago, and he's done a solid job so far. We hope that both of these guys will be helping us in the majors in the not so distant future. The number 50 prospect in baseball, second best prospect in our organization, Arturo Uresti, who was an international free agent signing 6.5 years ago, just promoted to AAA today. He played 41 games in AA a year ago. We played him in 44 AA games this year, and he did even better, hitting .333, 12 homers, 42 ribbies, an insane 212 WRC plus and a 3.1 WAR across just those 44 games. I think he's going to draw a lot of walks and think he's going to hit a decent number of home runs. Doesn't look like he's quite ready for the major leagues right now, but the durable right-handed hitting outfielder certainly looks like someone who, if he does well in AAA, could be ready to help us come September. And we also promoted to AAA Jesus Saldana, only 21 years old, the 126th ranked prospect in baseball. You may remember Saldana. We went pitcher in the 2032 IAFA class, and Saldana was a relatively expensive one at $3.5 million, but we really liked him. And he has really had a pretty meteoric rise through the organization over the last year and a half. Spent 2035 in A ball and high A ball, and although he wasn't particularly impressive in high A ball last year, going 4-8 with a 5.16 ERA, when we looked at his ratings compared to Double A at the beginning of this season, it looked like he was more than ready for that level, and he has certainly showed that to us, going 5-1 with a 2.76 ERA in Double A. And it looks like he's ready to hold his own in AAA right now. He's not going to turn 22 years old till September 14th. We still think if he fully develops, his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be above average. You combine being above average in all 3 of those categories with a potential 4 or 5 pitch arsenal, and I still think he could be a pretty interesting starter. His stamina is not necessarily ideal at 40, but certainly enough that he could be a 5+ inning guy. And we certainly have the opportunity to try to get him into the development lab and maybe improve his stamina a bit as well. Doesn't necessarily look like he's going to be an ace, but if he comes close to reaching his full potential. I think he could definitely be a solid middle of the rotation type starter for us. He is a guy, as I mentioned, that we had huge expectations for when we were scouting him, and when we were bringing him on board, felt like he was a 5-star potential guy with a ceiling that was incredible. He's added a couple of miles to his velocity since then, and you can see since the end of last season, he's picked up 10 points in his stuff, 5 points in his movement, and 5 points in his control, at least according to our scout. So he's gotten better pretty quickly, and we're hoping that the 6'7", 200-pound starter from the Dominican Republic may be able to help us in the not-too-distant future. We're going to be in a tough salary situation again next year, with Jackson Ferris making a lot of money and Sergio Campos, who's had a disappointing first year in Oakland thus far, set to make a lot of money in arbitration as well. So some more cost-effective pitchers like Weiss, and hopefully down the line like Mr. Saldana could be pretty important to us, not just having a better rotation, but also hopefully having a more cost-effective rotation in the not-too-distant future. So hopefully those two top-end minor league prospects and the rest of our prospects across our organization will continue to improve and play better this year. Over the near term, hopefully we'll be getting Mike Curtis and Chisen Harimoto back from their rehab assignments in AAA in the not-too-distant future. And clearly we're hoping that Landin's injury will not be a serious one. And things worked out about as well as possible with Landin. Sore ankle day-to-day for 3 days, so we can certainly live with that, given what the potential alternative could have been. And we played 8 straight games to start the month of June. Ended up with a 4-4 record. We won the final game of the series against Cleveland. Then we split 2 out of 4 on the road at Texas. Unfortunately, after that, we dropped 2 out of 3 on the road against Houston. So we're still clinging to a small lead in the division, just a half game above the Rangers at this point. We've got the Angels ahead of us in the next 3 games at home, or the next 2 games at home, and then 4 games at home against Seattle. So these 4 series in a row against our divisional rivals, and then we won't be facing another team in the division for the rest of the month. And fortunately, after that pretty mediocre start to the month, we just had a really nice homestand. Won 5 out of 6 games, split the 2 games against the Angels, and then a 4-game sweep against Seattle. Headed back on the road for a brief series down in San Diego, and then we'll be home for the Diamondbacks before we go on the road for Cleveland and Detroit. And then we'll be back home on June 30th for the final game of the month against the Rockies. And despite the 4 wins that we have in a row, we still only have a half-game lead on the Rangers, as they've won 4 in a row as well. We've got the second and third best records in the American League. The Rangers are up 5.5 games on the final wild card spot. So hopefully we will guide this team back into the playoffs for the 5th time in 6 years after missing the playoffs last season. But clearly would prefer to win the division and hopefully be in a situation where we've got a first-round bye and then home field advantage for a divisional series matchup. Andy Brailovsky and Jake Ortega are now running 1-2 in the American League batting race. Juan Ramos continues to lead the league in ribbies. Brailovsky second in the league in OPS, and Jake Ortega continues to lead the league in batter WAR. So the offense continues to hum on all cylinders. Jackson Ferris is now tied for second in the league with 9 wins and is still second in the league in strikeouts. But Steve Genus from Texas having another monster season as he attempts to win a third consecutive AL Cy Young Award. And unfortunately, we lost the first game of the latest road trip in 12 innings at San Diego. And Jake Ortega going to be impacted by a week with a sprained ankle. Moderate impact on both throwing and running, so that is certainly not optimal, especially given his fragility. Given that we're in this for the long run, we're probably going to be real conservative with him and just let him rest for the rest of this week. Not put him on the IL, though, so hopefully we'll have him back in the not-too-distant future. Certainly not optimal to be running a man down, but we also don't want to risk this turning into something more significant. You can see we've dropped to second, so Texas won their game today, so we're presumably half a game. Actually, we're tied with them in the standings, so they haven't played yet. We lost the game, and that pushed us behind them by percentage points on the season so far. So hopefully we can kind of hold serve and just kind of remain where we are, flat with the Rangers over the next week, even though we'll be missing our premier player. And unfortunately, without Ortega in the lineup, we've had a rough week. Lost 4 in a row before salvaging the final game of the series against the Diamondbacks. Fortunately, the Rangers haven't been playing well either, only half a game behind them, but we are now in a wild card position rather than in the division lead, 5 games up on the Twins for the final wild card in the American League. Unfortunately, Ortega's sprained ankle really isn't getting any better. Recovery time is now unknown. We've sat him out for the last 6 days. We're going to throw him on the IL. You know, it's conceivable he might end up back a little earlier, and it stinks that we've wasted several games running one man down on the roster, but we thought he was going to be back in a week, and it doesn't seem like, even though he hasn't played in almost a week at this point, that he's getting any better. So at this point, we're going to put him on the IL. It looks like only retroactive to the 20th. So even though we had him benched, did they play him somehow? No, his last game was the 17th. I don't know why placing him on the IL would be retroactive to the 20th, but given that, that means we've got another 7 days till he's ready, so we might just keep going day to day with him at this point. Sit him out and hope that magically he gets better. And Ortega still banged up, still unknown recovery, and when we try to place him on the injured list right now, it's retroactive to June 24th. I always thought that with the injured lists, you could put him on retroactive to the last time that they actually played. So clearly I misunderstood the way the rules work, or perhaps the way that OOTP works, but it looks like you can only backdate someone 3 days retroactively. So if I had known that, probably would have put him on the IL a few days ago. Now we're kind of trapped again, where he's got this unknown recovery time. Worry that if we put him on the IL, he's going to magically get better after a day or two, but we've been running without him for over a week now, and that is certainly not optimal, especially because we haven't been playing really well down a man. We lost 2 out of 3 at Cleveland, and now we're going to finish up at Detroit and then home against Colorado. But we have been certainly struggling since Mr. Ortega got hurt, with a 2-6 record since he hurt himself late in that game against San Diego. And things have really gone off the rails in the second half of the month of June. Finished it up, lost 2 out of 3 to Detroit, and then we lost the first game of the homestand against Colorado. So as good as we were feeling about this team a couple of weeks ago, Ortega still banged up, unknown recovery time after it looked like he would be back in a week. Obviously wish we had put him on the IL at this point, but we're getting stubborn about things at this point. Taking a look at the team statistics and a 12-14 record in the month of June. So after a very good April and an outstanding May, we were not great in the month of June, even though we got off to a decent start. The offense still excellent, tied for first in the American League in runs scored. And thinking back to our last episode, YME943 had asked what was going on with our base running. We were one of the worst teams in the American League through the first couple months of the season. I said hadn't changed any settings. I thought it was probably just bad luck, and you can see now we're right back to the middle of the pack in that category. So just one of those things. Pitching-wise, we're doing fine. 5th in the league in runs allowed. Starters ERA is 5th. Bullpen ERA is 2nd. The defense has been pretty solid. The 46-34 record is a game below expectations. Would love to figure out what's going on with Jake Ortega before we have to put him on the IL, because I know the second I do that, he's going to be healthy like 3 days after that and then have to sit out for an extra week. But certainly has been frustrating that an injury that we thought was going to impact him for just about a week has now been a 2-week injury, and his recovery time is still unknown. So 80 games into the season, just closing in on the midway point, 2.5 behind the Rangers in the division, and we are 4 games up for the final wild card spot on the Minnesota Twins. So feel pretty good that we're going to finish with a winning record, and we're going to have an improved starting pitcher's ERA compared to a year ago. But the main goal is certainly to get this team back into the playoffs. If the season were to end today, we would be there. But with the way we're playing over the first 2.5 months of the season, we're thinking we might have a chance at dethroning the Rangers in the AL West. That is certainly a goal of ours, but having Ortega back in the lineup every day will certainly increase our chances of getting past Texas. And I guess our patience has paid off. We just won the second game of the series against Colorado 9-3, and Ortega is finally healthy, and he's on a hot streak, so I need to unbench him now that he is back. So he ended up missing about 2 weeks. Obviously, in retrospect, wish we had just put him on the IL, but we just weren't sure whether he would really be out that long, and we're hoping to avoid having him sitting healthy on the IL for any period of time. And we won our first 2 games of the month to get to our mid-season review with Mr. Fisher. Had an off day yesterday, so feeling slightly better about things at 48-34 now, just a game behind. Pleased with that. Mr. Fisher, pleased that it looks like we're going to hit our goal to achieve a winning record. Happy that we've improved our starters ERA. Not pleased that we haven't brought in an MVP. Still a lot of work to do in our farm system, and he continues to think that we're trying to alienate our fans. But all things considered, I think it's been a pretty solid first half of the year for this Oakland squad. A game behind in the division, as I noted. We're now 5.5 up on the final wild card spot in the American League. Ortega back in the lineup has slipped to second in the batting race. Ramos continues to lead the league in ERA. Ortega second in OPS and tied for first with a couple of other guys in batter war. Jackson Ferris remains tied for second in wins, but Steve Jean is starting to run away with leading the league in wins and strikeouts at this point. Ferris has fallen to third in the league in strikeouts. Not expecting too much is going to change statistically in just a couple of games. We've dipped to second in the league in runs scored, still 5th in the league in runs allowed, and our 48-34 record is a game below what our underlying statistics suggest it should be. So, with just over half the season in the books, it's time for our annual mid-year review. We've talked a lot about our ace, Jackson Ferris, having an excellent year, 10-2 record with a 3.36 ERA, 1.7 WAR, making a lot of money at this point, but he's doing his best to try to earn it this year. Jason DeCaro, a longtime member of our starting rotation, 5-3 record, 3.58 ERA, 2.1 WAR on the season. So according to WAR, he's been even more effective than Ferris has been. Our 3 and 4 starters, who are two relatively new additions to the team, have been disappointing. Both Kevin Patterson, who's 6-4, and Sergio Campos, who's 5-3, have ERAs above 5. Certainly would love a better performance from both of those players over the course of the season. Bobby Garland, though, has done a real nice job for us since we moved him into the number 5 spot. We've been concerned about his lack of control, and he has walked 34 batters in 71 2/3 innings, but he's been pretty effective overall on the season, 6-2 record with a 3.14 ERA, and when we take a look at his pitching splits as a starter, 4-2 with a 3.20 ERA. So he's done a really nice job for us as a number 5 starter. Don't see any need to take him out of the pen, and we'll try to remain patient with both Patterson and Campos, but they've been disappointing thus far. Jeremy Scholl has not been great as our closer. 13 saves, but a 4.38 ERA, and he's allowed 6 homers and 11 walks in just 24 2/3 innings. The 2034 All-Star and Mariano Rivera Award winner has been a below replacement level pitcher for us this year. One guy that we can't say that about is our new stopper, Doug Weiss, who has a 2.34 ERA in 34 2/3 innings, making his major league debut for Oakland this year. Certainly would be a guy that we would consider moving into the rotation if we need to. But we're going to be patient with Patterson and Campos a little while longer, I think. If Garland was the problem, we'd probably have a quicker hook with him, but we'll see how Patterson and Campos do over their next few starts. We're also getting close to the point where it might be time to investigate the trade market. So a lot of different levers that we can potentially press in an effort to improve the pitching staff. New addition, Kamani Gigolo O'Banner, 3.28 ERA over 35 2/3 innings. He's been pitching fine since he got back from his injury. R.J. Cope with a 3.31 ERA over 32 2/3 innings, whip of less than 1 for the lefty, who is technically a two-way player. 1 for 5 this year with a couple of strikeouts. He's someone who is technically a two-way player, but for obvious reasons, when we look at his batting ratings, he doesn't really get a lot of playing time. Mike Curtis only pitched 5 innings this year, just recently got back from an injury. Hopefully we'll be getting more out of him going forward. Levi Sterling has had a nice bounce-back year. Has cut his ERA basically in half from where it was a year ago to 2.35. Jamie DeVore, former starter for us, probably in his final days in an Oakland uniform, has an ERA of over 8 this year. He's also making a lot of money at $6.5 million, set to make $10 million next year with a team option. Have a hard time believe that we'll exercise that. Would love to maybe use him in a trade if someone has any interest in bringing him on board from us, but I'm not expecting there to be a large demand for his services. He does have option years left. He's been pitching so horribly that it's not inconceivable. We might have to send him down to AAA. And then Chisen Harimoto, the lefty specialist we brought on board this past offseason, has a 2.82 ERA with 23 strikeouts and 22 1/3 innings pitched. Has not allowed a homer and has only allowed 13 hits. taking a look at his pitching splits, and he is allowing a 111 batting average to left-handed pitchers. He's been incredibly tough on lefties, as we expected. Righties hitting almost 300 against him. That adds up to a decent season for him. But looking at his ratings, we thought that he could be a pretty useful lefty specialist for us, and thus far he's done a good job, Cooter, getting out those left-handed hitters. And obviously, we'd love to add someone who could help our pitching staff. I feel like we're in a situation where we probably need a starter a bit more than a reliever, and I don't see any huge help among the starters here. Owen Murphy would probably be the most interesting, but he's got 2 more months till he recovers from that torn flexor tendon. Chris Jett looks like he could be an interesting reliever, but again, I don't know that that's where we really need the help. So we'll continue to monitor the market over the next month as we get closer to the trade deadline. I'm sure there will be some higher quality pitchers who end up getting added to the list over the next few weeks, but right now, at least in terms of the guys who are on the trade block, I don't think there's a obvious huge impact move that we could make. We'll turn now to our lineup, and as we've talked about, we've been one of the top scoring teams in the American League this year. Dave Ackley hitting just .232, 2 homers, does have 28 ribbies, so he already has more ribbies this year than he did all of last season. He's got his WRC plus up to 82 and almost a win above replacement, but quite honestly, we were hoping when we signed Ackley to that long extension when he was a relatively unproven player that his bat at the major league level would be a bit more effective than it has been. Jaden Boakai, backup catcher, hitting .255 with an 89 WRC plus. Like his glove, don't think his bat is quite as good as Ackley's is, even though thus far this year he's been a bit more productive at the plate. First baseman Andy Brailovsky having a really nice year, .317 average, 19 doubles, 12 homers, a 148 WRC plus, and a 2.4 WAR as our first baseman. He's going to be arbitration eligible next year, making about $10 million. Likely we'll bring him back. One of the better left-handed hitters in our lineup. In fact, he's probably the second best left-handed hitter in our lineup at this point, arguably behind Juan Ramos, who's hitting .301, 20 homers, and 81 ribbies, having a monster year for us, 153 WRC plus. His WAR of 2.4 is the same as Brailovsky's, simply because he doesn't bring much to the table defensively and has been used primarily as a DH. But those two guys have definitely been real important to our lineup. Steve Allison up as a utility infielder, hitting .218 and 110 at-bats. He's ended up starting 25 games, more than we would have expected, but we've had a few infielders banged up here and there. Put up a 96 WRC plus for us with that glove that can basically play any position in the infield pretty capably. If he continues to be close to a league average offensive player, he's got a lot of value as a utility infielder. A lot of teams he'd be starting. Unfortunately for him, he's behind an excellent second baseman and shortstop. And that second baseman is Alejandro Landin, hitting .257, 17 homers, 61 ribbies, 122 WRC plus on the year for the IAFA signing, who has worked out well for us. Nelson Castellanos has been platooning at third base with Roddy Mesidor. Castellanos hitting just .233 and 103 at-bats, 62 WRC plus. He's a guy who conceivably we could start giving Allison some time over at third base. Allison would certainly be an upgrade with his glove, and at least might be a little more productive against left-handed hitters than Castellanos has been so far. Rodney Mesidor has been our third baseman against right-handed pitching, and he's been pretty good, hitting .292, 11 doubles, 7 homers, 28 ribbies, a 120 WRC plus on the season. So right now, I think if we do anything, it might be swapping Allison in for Castellanos as our third baseman against left-handed pitching. Our shortstop is Andy Toribio. He's actually having a bit of a down year for him. He was a AL Rookie of the Year and an All-Star in 2034. Followed that up with a really nice season last year. The batting average is where he's been hurting this year, batting just .219, and his BABIP has plunged to .230. So I think he's probably just gotten a bit unlucky. You can see his BABIP is kind of major league average. Still does hit 14 doubles and 32 ribbies. A little less than a league average offensive player, but has still put up a win and a half of WAR, given his sound defense and the durability that keeps him in the lineup every day. Turn our attention now to the outfield. Brady Harris likely playing his final year with us. He is going to be a free agent, and last time we checked in, he was looking for crazy money. Still looking for the same $33.6 million a year over 7 years, so probably not a guy that we can bring back. But he's having a really nice year for us this year. .283 average, 20 doubles, 14 homers, driven in over 50 runs, 2.7 WAR, and a 141 WRC plus. I think that 2.7 WAR might be the second best figure on the team. I know it's behind Ortega, but I don't know if it's actually behind anybody else. I can't remember where Landine was. Landine was only 2, so having a nice year for us, but we'll probably have to move on from him next season. Hopefully we'll get a compensatory pick in return. Luis Taveras hitting .294, 8 homers and 29 ribbies and 170 at-bats. Playing primarily against left-handed pitching, but he has gotten a little bit more playing time when we've had some injuries. For instance, when Ortega's been banged up recently, 146 WRC plus. Over the last few years, he has basically been a platoon player for us who plays against lefties and then occasionally against righties. Due to be making $6 million in ARB next year, might start pricing himself out of that kind of role. Now, conceivably, there could be a bigger role for him if we do move on from Brady Harris, as we're expecting to, but we'll have to kind of be pretty confident that we want to be playing Taveras 130, 140 games next year if we're going to be spending $6 million on him. Jake Ortega, as we know, has been banged up, but still having an excellent season. .337 batting average, 16 doubles, 3 triples, 14 homers, and 18 steals, 4.5 WAR, and a 170 WRC plus. The main thing with him is just to hopefully keep him healthy the rest of the way. Not going to play as many games as he's played in the first few seasons of his career, but hopefully we can get another 70-plus games out of him over this second half of the season. And the third lefty that we have in our lineup, and certainly the worst of the 3 hitters now behind Brailovsky and Juan Ramos, is Bobby Burner Cabral. Cabral hitting .210 this year, 8 homers and 22 ribbies and 238 at-bats. Starting him only against right-handed pitching, but still only an 83 WRC plus. He's been below replacement level. Clearly hasn't been producing the way that he did over the first couple years of his career with us in Oakland, when he had a 110 and a 111 WRC plus. Over these last few years, he's been a below-average offensive player more often than not hitting the same kind of home runs and not driving in runs at the same rate he did those first couple years. He's got that Hidero Endo profile, that Byron Brain profile that we don't love. Struck out 110 times and 238 at-bats this year. Love the captain personality, but closing in on 30 years old. It's conceivable we might be getting close to the time where we need to move on from Burner Cabral, particularly because he's going to start making a little more money the next couple of years after this one before the team options kick in. So have some definite decisions to make. While we're talking about Byron Brain, we know that Hidero Endo has retired. We talked about that a while back, but let's see what Brain is doing with the Miami Marlins with his low contact and his big strikeout. And he's hitting 204, 115 strikeouts and 235 at-bats. Does have 14 homers and 33 ribbies, so he's been a league average offensive player. But using him as a big part of the deal that we put together to bring Patterson and Brailovsky on board, still think that was a good trade for us. Sergio Estrada hitting below 200 for them. Rogelio Contreras still in the minors. Rory Newman 0-3, not doing much in the minors this year. So although Patterson has been disappointing, Brailovsky has been so good that still kind of not minding that we moved on from Byron Brain last summer. And there's definitely a little more high-end talent on the trade block among position players. Catcher Francisco Alvarez, captain personality, 34 years old, making a ton of money with the Dodgers, still putting up a 120 WRC plus this year with 12 homers and 194 at-bats. In the final year of his deal, not willing to waive his no-trade clause. Catcher I don't think is a huge need for us, but still would obviously like to add talent when we could. Dylan Cruz certainly could be an interesting rental as an outfielder, but not willing to waive his no-trade clause quite yet either. In the final year of his contract, making $23 million, putting up a 146 WRC plus this year. Good, solid defensive outfielder with a pretty good bat. Certainly could see a scenario where we would be interesting in bringing like someone like Cruz on board. Just don't know that we'll be able to have the assets to bring him on board. Actually, I'm sure we do have the assets to bring him on board. The question is whether we would be willing to give up the assets necessary to bring him on board. And before we can even start thinking about that math, he's got to be willing to waive his no-trade clause, and it doesn't seem like he is at that point quite yet. And probably, unfortunately for us, the Nationals are just a game behind in the NL East, so it's very conceivable that unless they fall apart over the next 2 or 3 weeks, he's probably just going to want to try to continue contending for a playoff spot with the team where he's spent his career. The Dodgers and Alvarez are a 500 team, but they certainly will have more money to spend and have been a perennial powerhouse in this game. So maybe at some point one of those guys or somebody else will be willing to waive a no-trade clause. If I had to think about what we do, would love to add a big-time starting pitcher. Just don't know that there's really one out there who fits the bill. Position-wise, if we could upgrade from Bobby Cabral, that might not be the worst thing in the world, given that we're thinking we might be wanting to move on from Cabral after this season anyways. I don't think he's really going to have a ton of trade value. I guess that's something we can check in on right now. I'm guessing with the money he's making and the struggle to hit 200, nobody offers a single player in trade for him. If we were to keep 80% of his contract over the next several years, does that make it a bit more enticing? And you can see still not a heck of a lot in return. Now, we can get the starting pitchers that we're looking for, but they're guys in their late 30s and early 40s who are not necessarily big difference makers anymore at this point in their careers. A 5.18 ERA this year for Pablo Lopez, 5.57 for Trevor Rogers, and Logan Gilbert with a 4.83 ERA and a 7-7 record, probably having the best year of any of these guys, but don't think that any of them are the answer, and I also don't think that we ultimately want to be retaining 80% of Burner Cabral's contract, so we'll certainly be investigating the trade market in the coming weeks, and we'll see if there's something that we can do. We do have money to take on a contract. We do have assets that we'd be willing to trade, since we are a team that thinks it's a win-now team and hopes to get back into the playoffs. But I don't think we're going to pay a crazy price for anyone we bring on board. But hopefully over the next few weeks there will be some teams falling out of contention, and prices maybe will be a little more reasonable if there's a lot of people trying to shop assets on the market, and maybe there will be a few more players available down the line as well. And we also still do have the farm system to potentially help us. The minor league system has moved up to being ranked 11th. Saldana and Uresti, the two closest guys to be able to help us. Saldana 3-1 with a 4.42 ERA in his first 6 starts in AAA. He has struck out 50 batters in 38 2/3 innings, but he's also given up 9 home runs in 38 2/3 innings. Certainly some work until I'd be comfortable having him at the major league level, but he's not too far away, and if we don't see him in September, would certainly think we would see him at some point next year. We may not wait that long for Arturo Uresti, though. He is off to a great start in AAA, 3.06 average, 7 homers and 16 ribbies in his first 85 at-bats, OPS over 1,000 and a 148 WRC+. Number 43 prospect in baseball. Looks like he's made a little bit of progress, I think, when it's contact since the last time we checked in. And looks like his power in his eye, the upside is higher. Is he really? Yeah, I don't know if we've just gotten a bad scouting report since the last one we had at the start of the month of June. But his power potential and his current power have both improved, and his contact have improved as well. So Uresti is certainly a guy who we could bring up, and it's hard for me to imagine that he would be batting as poorly and struggling to keep his batting average above the Mendoza line, which has been a constant struggle for Bobby Cabral with us over the years. So even if we can't necessarily do something in the trade market, I think that Uresti might be an interesting guy to think about bringing up in the not-too-distant future. Again, the offense hasn't really been a problem, but always looking to make the team better. And if we can't find what we need in the trade market, we are in a fortunate situation this year where we've got some talent in AAA that's not too far off being ready for the majors, and certainly you could argue in the case of Uresti that he's ready for the majors right now. So going to have some interesting decisions to make as we move over these next close to 4 weeks before the trade deadline. Next episode, we'll continue to think about the trade market, but we're also going to dig in deep when we get to the draft, and the draft is going to be only a week away from now, so we will be doing our annual draft preview in our next episode, and see if we can maybe be in a position where we're going to be picking a little earlier than we have in previous years with the 20th pick this upcoming draft, and see if maybe the worldwide scouting department can help us ensure that we make a good decision that will help us keep this team competitive, not just this year, but long into the future. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.